But messaging will need to shift. You might come up with a different way to say it than you did before, knowing that some people are struggling, and there has to be empathy.
Every conceivable piece of value that your company brings to the table and emphasizing the ones that differentiate you from everyone else.
Obviously, we need to look at quality. Obviously, don't get so obsessed with that lead number.
Welcome back, y'all, for another episode of the Mission Control Podcast. It's another bonus episode. Today we've got Tim Brown with Hook Agency. What up, Tim?
Yo, how's it going? I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me, bro.
Of course. I'm going to have to start charging you for appearances.
Yeah, exactly.
Today we're going to talk about what you should do as far as your marketing during a recession, an economic downturn, or just a time of uncertainty. So, Tim, what advice do you have for people if they're reluctant to advertise during these types of times?
Well, a lot of the smartest people that I listen to, and in the roofing industry, actually, because I just went on this 8-stop tour in roofing and talked to some really smart people like Heath Hicks, people like Dustin Beegler, people that other roofers generally look up to and respect. And the way that they look at the recession coming is not like, batter down the hatches, let's be scared. They're looking at it like, all right, how much opportunity there's going to be and how much we can get a lead during this time. Because a lot of people do that. The first thing you do is you go, all right, I'm going to cut these expenses, and less experienced owners might go directly to marketing. And when you go to marketing and you chop it, the good news is for your competitors that they can take market from you, because it's all about taking market share, right?
Sure.
If I can think about it a different way, I can think about how can I push in aggressively? Maybe it's not always money that I'm spending. Sometimes it might be a mindset. Like, what can I do that's cheap or free that I can do with my time that I could double during this recession? So if this next year ends up being bad, and I effing hope not, I'm going to edit myself for fun because I'm about to be a dad, So then I effing hope not, it's not going to be bad. But if it is, what could you double that's cheap or free to you that you could take some market share? So it's not just me and Michael just saying, oh yeah, just keep on spending. Maybe it's stuff that you have control of that isn't that expensive that you can push on instead. So that's my first thing.
That's a really good point. And, we'll take that, and I'm going to add something to it. So that shouldn't only be in a time of economic downturn, recession, or uncertainty. Like, that's something I think that would behoove you from a marketing standpoint and really your business in general. Like, if you look at that every day, every week, every month, every year, especially. And it's one of those things where it's not always, the answer is not always, we'll just spend more money, right? I benefit, Tim benefits from you spending more money with us. Any other marketer is likely going to benefit from that. But it's not always the answer, right? If you can get more out of what you're doing now by way of refined processes, by way of sales activities, like that's a really good thing. And ultimately, if you look at how much you're putting out money-wise and what you're bringing in money-wise, the more activities and things you guys are doing internally to generate opportunities, the lower your cost per lead and your cost per acquisition is going to be. Yeah. But you have to have a system, you have to have a process, and I'd say the minority of contractors have a sound system or process as far as like those activities, lead intake, things like that. But even once you develop those things, you have to be an effective leader and delegate to somebody to hold your team responsible and accountable. And that's where a lot of you are failing, just in the spirit of transparency, right? I see it all the time. Like, you have to, once you develop the system and process, there has to be somebody holding your team accountable to make sure that they're doing these things and coach them on how to be better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's a really good point. So I would say if you've got, the assumption would be when things get tight and somebody looks at, let's say, their 401k or their crypto portfolio, and they see things just nosediving, right?
Yeah.
they're more reluctant to spend money. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, in the context of like roofing, you're going to be less affected by that because you're likely going to be selling a need versus a want, right? For the
True.
folks that are selling $300,000 full remodels, I would think that those might get put on the back burner. You might run into more tire kickers. But
Yeah.
even if search demand and volume is down during an economic downturn, I would say that those people that are searching are less likely to be tire kickers, and those opportunities are exponentially more valuable to you,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would also add that you may need to tweak your messaging a little bit. Obviously when stuff's booming, it's a different message, right? It's like, you got to get this done. You're excited about your home. And like, even during the COVID recession, the COVID downturn that we had, then home service providers got to like give this, like, you're spending a lot more time in your house. So what is that new messaging shift for you in this recession that we have and that may grow, that may be worse? So what messaging might you tweak? And I'm going to leave that out there as an open-ended question, but I'll also say what I would do if it was me. I would add financing. I just want to make the real basic things, like adding financing and leading with the monthly payment from the very get-go, not even making a decision based on this person, based on where you think they are at life, but literally leading with that all the time. And then I would opt for a repair thing, but I've talked about that on your podcast, so I don't want to go into that super deep. But like something like roof rejuvenation or something like that to make your repairs more profitable. But messaging will need to shift. You might come up with a different way to say it than you did before, knowing that some people are struggling, and there has to be empathy. There has to be empathy in your messaging. It's an expensive purchase. Don't act like it's not. Those are things that I think are really important during this time.
Yeah. So, what's an example of maybe like a nuance or altered messaging
Mm,
in a
yeah.
booming economy versus
Yep.
one
Yep.
that's more on a downturn?
Yes. Yeah. And I'd say, something along the lines of, you need to do this right the first time. Otherwise, it gets very more expensive. You're
Mm.
actually calling to price more because you're recognizing that some people may be strapped for cash. So you say something along the lines of, it's more expensive if you do it wrong the first time. You don't want to have to redo this in 2 years. You don't want to have to. We've seen leaky roofs after 2 years from people that are less reputable and aren't 5-star roofers. So you should choose somebody that you trust and is a locally trusted brand with 5-star rating or 4.9-star rating. Somebody like us who has the licenses. You're calling to the certainty of your service more. You're talking. I mean, we always need to get trust, but you're talking about price almost more often because you're essentially saying, yes, we're more expensive potentially, but you don't want to have to redo this in 2 years. That's the most expensive thing you could do.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Tim. And another way that you can kind of beat that messaging into your prospective customers, and I hate to say it that way, but it's true, is you're setting the stage for that when you're having your in-home consult, when you're having your sales conversation with your prospect. If you can reiterate that, like, affirmation is huge. So if you could reiterate that in like a proposal tool, like a lot of my guys use Roofer, right? Where they do their quote, they plug it into a template that they have, and like within that template, it gives maybe an intro about the company. Right there, they broadcast their licenses, their COI for insurance. Some of them have like a link to the Department of State or the governing body as far as where the customers can check. Like, hey, don't take our word for it or anyone else's. Make sure before you choose a contractor, you check on this website to make sure that they're
Mm-hmm.
licensed and insured,
Yeah.
right? So you're affirming what you've already set the stage for at the final
Mm-hmm.
step of your closing process when they're making their buying decision.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. That's beautiful. And I also think, I always think it's undermining the competitor too. And I never
Tactfully.
want you to do, yeah, tactfully. I never want you to do this in a way that's like gross. But if you can do it in a classy way, like tactfully, like undermining the competitor with things like Michael just said, like, God, that's such a beautiful thing. Like, we do not want, and ultimately, you know what? If I could undermine competitors, right, in my sales pitch, but I am also going to include a few other like reputable contractors in there, or excuse me, reputable marketing agencies in there, like Michael. Companies like this, companies that are reputable do things like this. I'm going to include that so that they don't think I'm just shilling for my company. I'm also saying companies that are reputable do things like this. And smart homeowners do things like this. Like you're setting the stage to kind of pigeonhole certain types of contractors that if you believe in your heart that you are the best and you believe in your heart that if they really went over in this direction, let's say, no offense, but some people will do this about storm chasers or people that are fly by night companies chucking the trucks. They'll essentially describe what that looks like so that when people see it, then they're not like attracted to that, like, oh, it's an $8,000 roof. Yeah, it's an $8,000 roof, because half the time they don't follow through on anything.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would add, it's not even really associated with that point, but another thing that I would say is like make sure that you're leveraging every conceivable piece of value that your company brings to the table and emphasizing the ones that differentiate you from everyone else. So that's not so much a
Yeah.
marketing thing as it is a sales thing. But and I've talked about this on other platforms. It's like, hey, if you've got Google local services and you're Google guaranteed, like that's really important. Like it's really important to be able for your salesperson to be able to say, like, look, we're vetted by Google. Like Google guarantees our work. Do you know what that means? No? Okay, let's talk about that. Right? We've passed background checks, right? So that you know who you're dealing with and the integrity of the company, who's going to be at your home. Like, it's really important for you to know that your home is safe and secure and that you can be trusted when you're dealing with XABC roofing company, right?
Yep.
And any other type of accreditations that you have
Yes,
or badges of honor that you wear,
Yep.
it's easy for a company to take those things for granted because you see them every day, you know that you have that, but you can't take that for granted, and you have to highlight and emphasize, especially those that differentiate you from your other competitors.
Ooh, it's so good.
And put
Yeah,
them on
I
your
think,
website.
yes, put them on your website, put them in emails, put them in your sales,
Collateral.
literature.
Yep.
Yep. So next, I'm going to talk about what happens when a recession happens in buying cycles. So it will be longer, potentially. They still got a leak. They still have an insurance claim. They still have certain things, but it slows people down because money is scarier, right? If you're a homeowner, money's scarier during this time. And if it gets worse, it's scarier still. So in 2023, if it gets real bad, you might still have a leak in your roof, but you wait a little longer. You might not sign that paperwork as quick, right? So what do you need to do as a roofer or other type of home service contractor? You need to have educational content to lessen the anxiety, to increase the trust. And that might include working with a company like Ascend and Hook or whoever, but it also might include video, right? Like your costs go up every time during this time. It's recession, but it's also hyperinflation. Not hyper. Okay, let's not say that. But it's inflation, right? And your costs are going up at the same time. Do you want to send out a person every single time, or could you create video content to scale your best closer and to actually facilitate conversations in between the in-person stuff? So actually, I think to decrease your costs as a home service contractor, you should invest in good video that actually is sales process video, like your top 7 questions that you get in the sales process, not marketing video where you spend $5,000 on a brand video that no one watches and you push Facebook ad spend to, and you piss away your marketing budget. I'm talking about sales video that's literally like you're scaling your best sales closer, and your leads, literally when you do these types of videos, in my experience, your leads will actually go down a little bit. That's weird. Why would I want that? Well, your quality goes up because the more video you have, that is actually questions in the sales process, the more likely you are to have people come in and be ready to buy. That's why Marcus Sheridan, They Ask You Answer, is his book. He talks about this is your 80% video. You're getting people 80%. And so when they come in, it's way easier to close. And so this sales focused video is a way to help people. It's educational content in those extended buying cycles.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I'll add to that, like, take for instance having like a video automation, and it makes sense because you're getting objections out of the way, right? Like if these are questions that are asked, it's better to address them on the front end and have a more qualified customer. And if there's 2 or 3 people out of 10 that leave your sales funnel because of it, like that's a win for you, right? Because that's less dead opportunities that your sales team is investing time and company resources, pulling reports for, et cetera, right? So, and those things add up, right, at scale. So another thing I'll say is, as far as like sales and conversion, what about like creating videos for each of your salespeople, like a soft intro and an automation that when it hits appointment set in your CRM, your customer is getting an email like, "Hi, I'm Mike with Ascend Digital, and I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about what you're going to experience when you work with Ascend Digital." I should take my own medicine and do this because I don't do this as I'm having this conversation.
Well, it's a little bit of like the amount of opportunities that you have to field as a roofing contractor versus a marketing agency. I don't do every single little thing that I suggest to roofers. I try to stick with the ones that I can back up with real examples of seeing it win.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a little bit different in different industries. Man, I just want to go back to your point before that though. Like, you know what is insanely damaging, or at least like you can waste a lot of money and time on, is just thinking of that top line lead number and not looking at the closing rate per lead source. And so like I love to balloon out leads. Like I'm a marketer, man. I'm a CEO, but I'm a marketer, right? And I've been the main marketer at a company before I was a CEO, like their main marketer internally, and we'd battle with the sales team. Yep. You're like, and like there's one main sales guy and me, and I'm like, there's so many leads, and he's like, those aren't all that qualified. And like we had fights internally, fights. And at the time, I was like, this guy's just a bullshit artist. He's a sales guy. He's a And then when I got on my own, obviously, like I don't have time as when I was the sole salesperson to field the worst possible leads. So I'm not trying to do a white paper how to price your exterior remodel and get that lead. I'm not trying to say like if I'm a roofing company and there's not like 20 salespeople sitting around that are just twiddling their thumbs waiting for the next lead, maybe I don't want to put the ad out for the roof could be as low as $4,000, like that Facebook ad. Maybe I'm actually going to have people that make my salespeople's lives miserable, and maybe those people are like my salespeople are really important to the business. And so basically what I'm saying is, at this point, I don't care how many leads I get. I care how many qualified leads. And I'm sure you have these conversations with people every day. So I'm not being high and mighty about this. I'm saying like, obviously we need to look at quality, and obviously don't get so obsessed with that lead number. I get it. You got it on the scoreboard in your office and you're looking at the lead number. Well, look at the qualified lead number.
Yeah, and that's a really good point as well, man, because like not all indicators are created equally, right? And there's a lot of different indicators, and context matters too, right? Because if I'm trying to sell you on the fact that a lead acquisition campaign's working, premised on the fact that you've got 100,000 impressions, that shit doesn't matter, right? You should pay more attention to leads, and then to take that a step further, qualified leads. But like if we're in month 3 of an SEO campaign and we notice that you're 6x in your impressions, like that's usually a catalyst and foreshadowing to the campaign being productive. So impressions in that context actually is important, right?
Yeah. And you would be remiss to stop when in that case it is a compounding thing versus in paid, it's not compounding, right?
Right.
It's actually like usually, I mean, I like paid, you like paid, we're not
Mhm.
saying anything negative, but it's generally like you're slowly getting less of a result over time because the ad cost goes up and things like that. But note here as well that your actual cost per lead on ad campaigns might go down during a recession if your competitors pull out. So kind of look for that. I feel like I always I have irons in the fire. You know, oh, dude, I heard an awesome idea from an SEO the other day that was like, he calls them canary experiments,
Mm.
where there's like, he's got like this like bloated like PBN like website out there with links from PBNs, private blog network in SEO, which means like they made their own websites and uh, found old domains and built them out on there, and then links to it. So then if that one goes down, like, hey, that's a method canary. I'm sorry, I'm not thinking about my audience right now because we're talking to roofers. But ultimately, like I will note, it's good to have experiments all the time. I always have Facebook ads, Google ads, YouTube ads, Instagram, TikTok. I got it all going because I'm trying to learn, right? So I spend a little bit more money on my marketing because I've got all these kind of canaries out there that like learning about it. And you should know if there's lower cost per lead in Facebook that you should probably push a little bit more. Like if you're seeing that, or if Google Ads like in your area or a certain area goes down, because it will go down if people get scared. So that's a good thing about when people get scared.
Yeah, I completely agree. Let me ask you this. What about
Yes, sir.
as a salesperson? So you're in home and you're discussing, the options that the prospective customer has, and you're walking them through what each one of those options look like. And obviously credibility and trust has a lot to do with somebody making a purchasing decision, and it doesn't matter what they're
Mm-hmm.
purchasing. I mean, outside of like a pack of gum, right? There's not much trust or credibility that's going to go into that. But like if
Mm-hmm.
somebody's buying a roof, they've got to trust you, and the more that you can separate yourself and show that you know your shit, the better off, presumably, the more likely you are to close that customer. What about like sales reps becoming more informed with, like, let's say credit cards and what the perks of credit cards are, and what might be a preferred credit card to use in a transaction that could yield the consumer a benefit and allow them more time to pay off? Maybe they don't want to do financing. They've already got an existing line of credit and they want to leverage that. What would you say as far as like salespeople investigating what different perks are of different credit lines to just add
Oh,
that
that's
as just
beautiful.
another feather in the cap, right?
Oh, dude. You know,
Because
it's so funny.
nobody's going to
Like,
do
yeah,
that. Nobody does that shit. And if
yeah,
you're doing that, come on my podcast because I want to talk to you.
yeah. I feel like people underestimate like if you're the one that introduced them to something that's going to make the transaction easier or that's going to benefit them in a broader way, then you own that idea in their mind. And so, yeah, I think a lot of different like tools, like sometimes you could be the person with the siding upsell that says like this would match this, and it's an upsell, and so you're thinking, oh, that'll scare them off. It might be a major benefit because the other guy didn't talk about the upsell. You know what I mean? The other guy didn't know that this person isn't as price focused as they thought. They thought they came in, looks like a little bit of little house, and they may not want that or something. Well, maybe it's a little house and they have more money for other stuff. Um, but basically, if you introduce them to a concept, that's why I'd experiment with that all the time. I love that idea with the credit card. I love the idea of like trying to experiment with new little additional things that are add on. Like financing is the OG one.
Sure.
Um, but like, there's a lot of options for things to kind of like introduce them to that now if you're the only one that talks about that, um, then you own that idea and they're probably not going to go to the other person for that and be like, oh, by the way, I know you didn't mention financing, but this other guy mentioned financing. Are you offering that? Like they're going to go to the person that said it from the beginning.
Yeah, for sure. All right. What else do you have for the audience on the marketing side?
Well, do SEO. Do you know what I talked about this earlier this week, but do SEO during the winter and the off season for sure. Like it's a beautiful thing. Like if it's cold, you're not installing right now. Do things that are stores of value. That's one. As recession gets in there, yes, you're gonna want stuff to happen really quick because you're gonna want those leads. but don't forget about the long-term stuff. Um, what I want to say here is, as a roofer, I think a lot of you are going to win. A lot of you are going to do well despite this recession. I really believe that from everyone that I've heard that's super smart. There's going to be a lot of people winning. It's not a nice to have, it's a need. And I will note that I believe a lot of you are going to win. I think we're talking about it because it's interesting and people want to hear about it, but we're not like beating the drum of this is fear or anything like that. I really believe a lot of you are going to win, and I want to encourage you to take that mindset. And then there's going to be a few people that use that as an excuse to drop out, because some roofers right now just on the edge and they want to drop out, dude.
I had so many customers that reached out to me when COVID, first reared its ugly head, and their intuition was to pull back, and I advised against it, for the reasons that we've discussed in this episode, and they couldn't be more happy that they didn't. Right? It wasn't me just posturing and saying, right, because I benefit from you not pulling back, you shouldn't. It's like legitimately there's a lot of opportunity, and for if 80% of the people do pull back, guess what? It's ripe for the picking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, dude, that's important. And I think, like, don't take things for granted. So how does that make sense in this context?
Did you just predict my
So how many times have you had a conversation with somebody where it's like, the economy's thriving, everything's going well, things are loaded up, and it's just not the right time to do this, right? And invest in long-term strategies. And dude, it doesn't have to be SEO. It could be any type of like marketing or branding that would benefit their company long-term that isn't immediately 20, 30, 40 leads. But if you are proactive on those things, especially when times are good, but even when times are bad, you know what? As time moves on, to get an extra 20, 50, 100, 200 organic leads, or leads that are coming as a result of you developing a strong brand and becoming an industry leader, or perceive that in your community, it's a fucking beautiful thing.
That's so good, Michael. I mean, that's legit. That's real marketing, man.
Yeah.
When you act long term, like get your leads covered. Do ads, do Google ads, do Google ads. Maybe do some Facebook ads. Do what you need to get your nut, and then let's build out better stuff than that. Like even better. Let's get into SEO. Let's get into branding. Let's get into community events. Let's get into referral partner stuff where you're really driving referrals from insurance agents and realtors and all these, Michael's talked about that strategy with realtors. Like, look into that type of stuff. Like, get into the soft long-term stuff, and like keep your stuff covered on the main, getting leads, but build. And then you're out here like you're slamming the gas pedal into brand, and you're not worried about your nut. You got your nut covered, and you're slamming the gas pedal and brand, and you're going. The real move is when you already got everything covered and you're still slamming the gas pedal. Mm-hmm. Like I've had to communicate that internally to our team. Like when things are good, we have these meetings still. These meetings that like are sharpening our sales and marketing processes, right? We are not skipping a meeting because it's booming. And we are not skipping a strategy because it's booming. And we are not looking for a secret key when it's booming. We are layering on another secret key, and another secret key. And I just want to encourage everyone, don't go for looking for that secret all the time. Keep on layering stuff on and stay consistent even when you are booming. So even though this is a recession podcast, when you're booming in 2023, keep layering it on, baby. Go long term and go brand focused.
Yeah, and in your point specifically, let's use an analogy of like a salesperson, right? Anyone who's been in sales knows that if once you start thriving, you let your foot off the gas as far as prospecting, as far as effort, right? As far as follow up. Yeah. And if you stop on a Monday, it's not going to be Tuesday where it catches up with you. It's not going to be Wednesday. And depending on your pipeline, it might not even be the following week. It might be the following month. Mm-hmm. And if it catches up to you in a month's time, now you've got no leads. You don't have any opportunities. All your previous opportunities are dead because they bought from someone else or decided they're out. Now, if you start on day one of after that 30-day cycle where it caught up to you, it's going to take you a couple weeks to start getting in front of people again, right? There's always that lag. There's a lag to the time of impact, and then there's a lag to the time that it takes you to get back into a viable situation. So I'm a big fan of what you just said as far as layering on at all times, especially when it's
Yeah,
moving.
man. Yeah, that's the deal, man. When you're cranking, when you're winning, just be disciplined about continuing to prospect and to drive leads. That's beautiful.
So in conclusion, do all the shit that you don't want to do and do it
Yeah.
consistently.
Yeah, if you got anxiety, man, use the anxiety to do the things that you have control over. I get anxious about the economy, man. I get anxious. I got people on my team that get anxious. Guess what? Tell them to prospect. Tell them to meet with twice as many insurance agencies next week, or insurance, what do you call them? Agents. Um, Great referral partners, by the way, if you want. But so yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. Thank
No
you for
doubt.
hanging out. I gotta go eat some pizza here.
All right,
Thanks,
enjoy,
thanks
brother.
for
Appreciate
yeah,
you
thanks for
stopping by.
yes, sir. Appreciate
We out.
everyone watching. Bye.